Even as we grieve, we give thanks for this most faithful life. I am deeply aware of this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities.
Something is happening inside Buckingham Palace that the royal family never wanted the public to know. King Charles, a man who waited his entire life to wear the crown, is now quietly stepping back from the full weight of that crown. Not because of his cancer diagnosis alone, not because of age, but because of something far more personal, far more damaging. A situation so sensitive that those closest to the king have described it as a breaking point. And at the center of it all is Camilla, the woman Charles fought the world to make his queen. The same woman who may now be costing him everything he built. This is not a rumor. This is a pattern that royal observers have been tracking for months. And when you look at the timeline of events, the quiet decisions, the sudden shifts in protocol, and the way Prince William has been positioned in recent weeks, one thing becomes very clear. Charles did not just hand William more responsibility out of necessity. He handed him authority, final authority, the kind that does not get handed back. To understand how massive this moment is, you have to understand what it means for a sitting monarch to transfer decision-making power while still alive and still on the throne. It almost never happens. The last time the British monarchy saw anything close to this level of internal power restructuring, it sent shockwaves through the entire institution. It shook public trust. It changed the course of royal history, and many believe what is happening right now is just as significant, perhaps even more so. King Charles has always been a man of patience. He waited decades. He endured public humiliation. He watched his approval ratings fall and rise and fall again. He survived the Diana years, the tabloid wars, the explosive interviews, and the global scrutiny. And through all of it, he held on. He stayed the course. So when a man like that begins to quietly loosen his grip on power, you have to ask yourself one question. What broke him? Some reports suggest the answer lies not in his illness, but in what has been unfolding around Camilla. Observers close to the palace have noticed a distinct and growing tension. A shift in how Charles speaks about the future. A heaviness that goes beyond physical health. People who have been in rooms with him describe a man who looks like he is carrying something that has nothing to do with a crown. William has been seen taking meetings, making calls, sitting at tables where Charles once sat alone. The transition is quiet, but it is real, and it is moving faster than anyone expected. Something was set in motion, and the closer you look, the clearer it becomes. The royal family has survived wars, abdications, and global embarrassments. But there is one thing the monarchy has never been able to fully survive: betrayal from within. And according to multiple sources who have watched this story develop from the inside, that is exactly what King Charles is now facing. Not from a foreign enemy, not from a rebellious child, but from the woman sitting beside him on the throne. Camilla, queen consort turned queen, the woman Charles chose over everything, may have quietly become the greatest threat to his legacy. And the palace knows it. To understand the weight of this moment, you have to go back. Camilla Parker Bowles was never supposed to be queen. The British public resisted her for years. The memory of Princess Diana was too strong, too raw, too present. When Charles finally married Camilla in 2005, polls showed that a significant portion of the British public still did not accept her. The palace worked hard to change that. They managed her image carefully. They introduced her slowly. They gave her causes, appearances, and carefully scripted moments designed to make her feel safe and familiar to the public. And for a while it worked. But some things cannot be managed forever. And some patterns cannot be hidden no matter how skilled the press team is. Observers close to the royal circle have noted that Camilla's behavior in recent months has drawn serious internal concern. Some reports suggest that her conduct, both privately and in certain semi-public settings, has caused significant discomfort among senior palace staff. There are whispers about decisions made without consultation, about a growing sense that Camilla has been operating with a level of independence that those around Charles find deeply troubling. Many believe the tension reached a peak during a series of private engagements late last year. Details remain carefully guarded, But royal insiders have described an atmosphere inside the palace that shifted noticeably. Staff who have served the royal household for years reportedly found themselves caught between loyalty to the king and discomfort with what they were witnessing. That kind of tension does not stay contained. It spreads. And eventually it reaches the person at the top. What makes this particularly painful for Charles is the history. He sacrificed so much for Camilla, his public image, his relationship with his sons, his standing with the British people during the most turbulent years of his life. He chose her when the easier path would have been to walk away. And now many believe that choice is costing him in ways he never anticipated. The palace has not made any official statement. They rarely do when the wound is this personal. But actions speak louder than statements. And the actions Charles has taken in recent weeks, particularly toward William, suggest that something inside him has shifted permanently. A king does not hand away authority lightly, not unless he has a reason that cuts to the bone. If you are enjoying this breakdown, like this video and subscribe for more deep analysis. There is a moment in every royal transition when the shift stops being symbolic and starts being real. When it stops being about ceremony and starts being about control. About who makes the calls. About whose voice carries the final weight in the room. Many believe that moment has already arrived. And the man standing at the center of it, calm, focused, and more prepared than most people realize, is Prince William. The crown is not just passing. It is being actively transferred. And the speed of that transfer is telling a story that the palace has not officially announced but can no longer hide. Watch William's schedule over the past several months and something becomes immediately clear. He is not just filling in. He is not just representing the king at events Charles cannot attend due to health. He is making decisions, substantive ones. He has been present in meetings that go far beyond ceremonial duty. He has been briefed on matters that traditionally stay within the monarch's closest circle. People who work inside the palace structure have described a quiet but unmistakable reordering of how information flows and who receives it first. This is not the William of 5 years ago. That William was still finding his footing, still navigating the tension between his public role and his private frustrations, still being managed in many ways by the institution itself. But something changed. And those who watch him closely say the change is not just visible. It is striking. There is a decisiveness in how he carries himself now. A stillness that comes from a man who knows exactly where he stands and exactly where he is going. Some reports suggest that Charles himself initiated this shift with a directness that surprised even those closest to him. That rather than allowing William to gradually absorb more responsibility over time, Charles accelerated the process. Deliberately, with purpose, as if he understood that time was no longer something he could afford to waste. Observers have noted that certain key advisors who previously reported directly to Charles have quietly begun orienting themselves toward William. That kind of realignment does not happen by accident. It happens because someone at the top signals that the center of gravity has moved. Catherine has also played a role in this transition that should not be overlooked. Her return to public life after her own health challenges was carefully choreographed. But beneath the choreography was a message. William and Catherine are presenting themselves as a unit of stability, a future the institution can anchor itself to. And the palace machinery, which always follows strength, has begun moving in their direction. What is remarkable is how composed William appears through all of it. There is no visible urgency. No reaching for the spotlight. He is letting the transition come to him. And that restraint, that patience, is itself a form of power. The crown is heavy. William has known that his entire life. But for the first time, many believe he is truly ready to carry it. And Charles, it seems, agrees. Every great shift inside the British monarchy leaves a trail. Quiet trail. One that is only visible in hindsight when you look back at the people who were in the room, who heard the conversations, who watched the dynamics change in real time and said nothing. Not because they did not understand what they were seeing, but because inside the palace, silence is not just expected. It is survival. And yet, despite that culture of enforced discretion, fragments have been emerging. Small pieces of a much larger picture. And when you place those pieces together carefully, what you see is a group of royal insiders who saw this moment coming long before the rest of the world had any idea. There are people who have served the royal household for decades. Men and women who have navigated every storm the monarchy has faced since the 1990s. People who were present during the Diana years, during the Andrew scandal, during the explosive fallout with Harry and Meghan. These are not easily rattled individuals. They have seen things that would shock the public. They have kept secrets that will likely never surface. But even among this group, observers close to the palace say there has been a palpable shift in mood. A shared awareness that what is happening now is different. That this particular moment carries a weight unlike anything they have witnessed before. Some reports suggest that concern about Camilla's growing independence within the palace structure was not a sudden revelation. It was a slow build. Staff members who interact with the royal household at close range reportedly began noticing friction as far back as 2 years ago. Small things at first. Decisions made without the usual consultations. A tone in certain private settings that felt at odds with the carefully maintained public image. Requests that came through unofficial channels. Patterns that individually might mean nothing but collectively painted a picture that those experienced in palace dynamics found difficult to ignore. What is particularly striking is who stayed silent and for how long. Senior advisors whose entire professional identity is built around protecting the monarchy chose not to escalate their concerns through formal channels. Many believe this was not indifference. It was calculation. They were watching, waiting to see how Charles would respond, waiting to see whether the king himself would acknowledge what was happening around him or continue to shield the situation from scrutiny. The moment Charles began shifting authority toward William appears to have been, for many of these insiders, a signal they had been waiting for. A confirmation that the king had seen what they had seen, and that he had made his choice. Several of these individuals have since quietly repositioned themselves, aligning more closely with William's office, making themselves useful to the next chapter rather than clinging to the current one. That kind of movement inside a royal household is never random. These are disciplined, strategic people. They do not realign without reason. And the reason, many believe, is that they understand something the general public is only beginning to grasp. The palace does not announce its turning points. It simply turns. And those who are paying close attention can feel the ground shifting beneath their feet. The insiders felt it first. They always do. And their silence, for all this time, was never indifference. It was the sound of people waiting for the right moment to land on the right side of history. If you are enjoying this breakdown, like this video and subscribe for more deep analysis. When power shifts inside the British monarchy, the ripple effects do not stay contained within palace walls. They move outward. They touch every member of the royal family, every relationship, every carefully maintained public position. And right now, those ripples are reaching someone who has been watching this story unfold from thousands of miles away with an intensity that very few people fully appreciate. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, a man who walked away from the institution he was born into, a man who burned bridges so publicly and so thoroughly that many believed his chapter in this story was permanently closed. But power transitions have a way of reopening closed doors. And Harry, many believe, is holding something, a last card. One he has not yet played. To understand what this moment means for Harry, you have to understand what he lost and what he has been waiting for. When Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties in 2020, the official narrative painted it as a clean break, a mutual decision, a dignified separation. But those who follow this story closely know that the reality was far messier, far more painful. There were accusations. There were silences. There were moments where reconciliation seemed possible, followed by actions that made it feel impossible. Harry has been in a complicated holding pattern ever since. Close enough to the story to remain relevant. Far enough away to avoid direct accountability. But William stepping into final authority changes Harry's calculus entirely. Because Harry's relationship with William is not just brotherly tension. It is a deep, layered, historically complex fracture that sits at the very heart of the monarchy's future credibility. Some reports suggest that back-channel communications between Harry and the palace have never fully stopped. that despite the public silence and the carefully managed distance, there are threads of connection that have been quietly maintained. Not warmth necessarily, but contact, and contact in royal politics is never meaningless. Many believe Harry understands that with Charles potentially stepping further back and William ascending to a position of genuine final authority, the window for any meaningful reconciliation or renegotiation of his royal standing is closing. Not gradually, rapidly, because William, unlike Charles, has shown very little willingness to leave doors open for Harry. The relationship between the two brothers, by most credible accounts, remains deeply damaged. And a King William, even a future one, would have little political or personal incentive to welcome back a brother who exposed the institution so publicly. This is Harry's dilemma, and it is a profound one. He built an entire post-royal identity around his grievances with the palace. His book, his documentary, his interviews, all of it was constructed on the foundation of his conflict with the institution. But if William consolidates power and moves the monarchy firmly into a new era, Harry's narrative risks becoming irrelevant. Yesterday's story, a footnote rather than a chapter. The last card Harry holds is access. Specifically, access to information, to stories, and to a public platform that still commands global attention. Some observers believe he is carefully weighing whether to use that card before the window closes entirely. Whether to make one final move that forces the palace to engage with him on his terms rather than theirs. But here is the risk. William is not Charles. Charles carried guilt about Harry. A father's complicated love that made him vulnerable to Harry's appeals. William carries something different, a brother's broken trust. And broken trust, once it reaches a certain depth, does not respond to pressure. It hardens. Harry may be holding his last card, but the question is whether anyone at the table still needs what he is holding. There are moments in history that only reveal their true significance long after they have passed. Moments that look like small decisions at the time but turn out to be the hinge on which everything turns. The point where what came before and what comes after are so different that there is simply no path back to the way things were. Many believe the British monarchy has just reached one of those moments. And unlike the turning points of the past, this one did not arrive with a dramatic announcement or a public spectacle. It arrived quietly, in private meetings, in shifted protocols, in the steady, deliberate transfer of authority from a king who has carried the weight of a complicated legacy to a prince who has spent his entire life preparing for the moment that is now, finally, here. King Charles came to the throne later than any monarch in British history. He was 73 years old when the crown was placed on his head. He had waited. He had endured. He had watched his mother reign with a consistency and a steadiness that set an almost impossible standard. And when his moment finally came, it arrived already shadowed. By his health, by the Harry fallout, by the unresolved tensions that had been building inside the royal family for years. Charles wanted his reign to mean something. He wanted to be remembered as a modernizer, a king who helped the monarchy evolve without losing its soul. And in some ways, he has moved toward that vision. But the Camilla situation, the internal fractures, and his own physical limitations have forced him to make a choice that no king makes easily. He chose William, not just as an heir, not just as a successor waiting in the wings. He chose William as the present, as the functioning center of royal authority. And that choice, many believe, is now irreversible. What makes this moment so historically significant is not just the transfer of power itself. It is what that transfer represents for the identity of the monarchy going forward. William and Catherine represent something the institution has not had in a very long time. Youth, stability, a modern image that does not carry the accumulated damage of decades of scandal and public conflict. They are, in the eyes of many both inside and outside the palace, a genuine reset. A chance for the monarchy to step out of the long shadow of everything that came before and present itself to a new generation on entirely new terms. Some reports suggest that senior figures within the Church of England, the political establishment, and key Commonwealth nations have quietly signaled their comfort with this transition. That the groundwork for a William-led era has been laid more carefully and more extensively than the public realizes. that what looks like a gradual shift is in fact the final stage of a transition that has been in preparation for years. For Charles, this moment must carry an enormous complexity of emotion. He is a man of deep feeling, a man who has thought carefully about legacy, about history, about what it means to serve an institution that is older and larger than any individual within it. Handing authority to William is not defeat for Charles. Many believe it is, in its own way, his greatest act of kingship. The recognition that the monarchy's survival matters more than his own place at its center. That love for the institution, and perhaps love for his son, required him to loosen his grip before circumstances forced his hand entirely. Camilla's story is not over. The questions surrounding her conduct and her role within the palace will continue to surface. The British press, never gentle with this family, will keep pulling at those threads, and the palace will keep managing, deflecting, and carefully controlling what reaches the public. But the internal decision has already been made. The authority has already moved. And no scandal, no press cycle, no outside pressure changes what has already been set in motion behind closed doors. The dynasty is not dying. It is being reborn, quietly, deliberately, in the image of a man who has waited his whole life not with impatience, but with purpose. William is ready. The palace knows it. Charles knows it. And somewhere deep beneath the careful silence that defines this family, even those who have fought against this moment know it too. The point of no return has been reached. The crown is moving, and the British monarchy, for all its fractures and all its controversies, is stepping into a new chapter with a steadiness that its harshest critics did not expect and its most loyal supporters desperately needed. History does not always announce itself. Sometimes it simply arrives. And this time, it arrived in the form of a quiet decision made by a king who understood that the most powerful thing he could do for the crown he loves was to place it, firmly and finally, in younger and steadier hands. The story of Charles and Camilla will be debated for years. But the story of William and the monarchy he is about to lead is only just beginning. If this analysis opened your eyes to what is really happening inside the British monarchy, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe for more deep royal breakdowns every week. The truth about this family runs deeper than the